The Vault of Horror by Jack Oleck. Narrated by Chris Harvey. Based on stories by Al Feldstein and Bill Gaines. Originally published in the comic magazines Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror by William M. Gaines. The shadows seem to Rogers to be somehow threatening. There is a loneliness about a nearly deserted office building at night that is almost otherworldly, and he did not like it. He did not like it at all. It was as if the swarms of secretaries and executives and clerks who were the lifeblood of the building by day had, with their going, left it a corpse. His footsteps echoed eerily along the corridor, and even the harsh glare of the overhead lights seemed unable to dispel the gloom that, here and there, made long fingers of darkness where a nook or a bend in the corridor wall cut off the brilliance. The corridor was unaccountably cold. It had the damp chilliness of a mausoleum, so, as he walked on, he pulled the collar of his seedy coat tighter about his throat and mentally damned the engineers who had turned down the building's heating system as soon as the sun had set. At the end of the corridor, where several sets of sliding doors indicated that he had at last reached the elevators that were his destination, he jabbed viciously at the down button and then waited irritably. The sooner he was able to leave this hollow, echoing refrigerator, the better. It was only seconds, but it seemed an inordinately long time before one of the elevators arrived, and an even longer time before its doors slid smoothly open. But that was just his imagination, of course. The atmosphere of the building was getting on his nerves. In the elevator he pressed the ground floor button and staggered slightly as the elevator resumed its downward course. Still, though he could not really have said why, he felt uneasy. His eyes followed the flashing floor lights. He had entered the elevator on the 28th floor. Now he was on the 26th. The 25th. The elevator halted suddenly, taking him by surprise, so that his knees buckled slightly, and the tall man who entered as the door slid open glanced at him curiously. The man, however, paid him no further attention. Locked in his own thoughts, he too pressed the ground floor button. Again the elevator descended, and again at 22 it stopped. Rogers, impatient, cursed under his breath. But only for a moment, until he was distracted. This time there was no mistaking the disdain in the eyes of the man who entered. The look came and went quickly, but there was no missing it. Damn snob! Rogers came close to speaking aloud. The man was almost too well-dressed, too prosperous, too perfect. Everything about him, from the spotless collar of his white shirt to the knife-edged crease in his trousers, to the impossibly brilliant shine of his shoes, shrieked of money and the meticulous attention to sartorial detail that only money makes possible. Would they never reach the ground floor? Rogers's own eyes, as they watched the newcomer's carefully manicured finger punch at the button, mirrored his hostility. But the next passenger to enter the elevator at least gave him no cause for complaint. The latest arrival, when he had entered the elevator at the 26th floor and punched the ground floor button in turn, paid no attention to his companions. One fist on his hip, he stood in an unconsciously flamboyant pose, and Rogers, idly curious, wondered what he might be. A performer, perhaps? The music halls were filled with his type. Ah! The latest rider to walk through the sliding doors was more to his liking, sunburned and intense, and obviously uncomfortable in an ill-fitting business suit. His finger, as it depressed the button, was stained with paint. There was even paint under his fingernail. An artist? The elevator continued its downward plunge. 3, 2, 1. At last! It would be good to get out into the street, out of this skyscraping tomb that had somehow made him so tense. A glint of puzzlement came into his eyes. The elevator had not stopped at the ground floor. Even as he stared, the light behind the ground floor button went out and another flashed on. B? The basement? But the elevator still did not come to a halt. The B button too went dark as another blinked on. SB, and the elevator came to rest at last. Sub-basement? The words left his lips before he was aware he had even spoken them. But I pressed ground. The tall man, the one who had entered the elevator just after Rogers, was looking at the others questioningly. So did I. That was the actor. For lack of a better designation, Rogers thought of him that way. Only the artist remained silent as the last man, the one who was so impossibly impeccable, tugged at the elevator doors and said, Why doesn't it open? The artist, still silent, was the only one who thought to try the door open button. Instantly the doors slid back on their tracks. What the devil? The tall man, as he stepped through the open doors, voiced what they were all thinking. Looks like some sort of a club. Beyond the doors, a large, expensively furnished room made an attractive vista. Leather armchairs, sporting prints, and a plush carpet did indeed make it look like an exclusive men's club. Never knew there was one in the building. The actor, what Rogers had guessed rightly, his name was Sebastian and he was an actor of sorts, spoke to no one in particular. But as if his words were a signal, the man whose shirt was almost too spotless and whose shoes were almost too well shined turned angrily back to the elevator. His name was Critchit, and he was a man who had no patience with surprises. He had, however, even less patience when he reached automatically for the button panel beside the elevator doors and found none. There was no panel. His mouth, when he swung back to face the others, was tight with anger. But only he had given way to temper. The others were looking around the room, and their obvious uncertainty drove away his anger and replaced it with the beginnings of an unaccustomed tension. The room, except for the securely locked elevator doors behind them, had no other exit. Well, there's no way out, Rogers said unnecessarily, and flushed, uncomfortably aware that the others were staring at him. No. The artist, a hint of a smile momentarily relieving the hardness of his expression, was staring across the room to where a number of chairs had been piled up around a table. On the table sat an elaborately chased silver serving tray, and on the tray were several cut-glass decanters and a siphon of soda. Looks like we'll be here for a while. His head inclined towards the elevator doors. But someone's bound to calm down soon. Why not make the best of it? Another nod, this time toward the table, left no doubt of his meaning. For a moment no one moved. The club, if it was a club, was inviting but strange. A club with solid stone walls formed of blocks so perfectly joined that the walls seemed to have been poured from concrete. A club with no guests, no attendance. Well, Critchit, as though it were his right, took the lead. Why not? It was he, too, who took over the table when they had seated themselves around it. A decanter in his hand, he poured a drink for each. Carefully, expertly. There! Sipping at his own drink seemed to relax him, to make him appear less demanding. His eyes, wandering about the room, were no longer angry, but curious. What a strange situation to be in. It's almost like a dream. Dreams are much more frightening than this. Well, at least mine are. Rogers, embarrassed again, did not go on. In what way? Critchit, by nature accustomed to putting every moment of his time to good use, had seen his embarrassment but still asked the question. After all, one had to find some way to lighten a tedious situation. Well, in a strange, mysterious, unworldly way. The centre of all eyes, Rogers had no choice but to continue. Totally unbelievable, and yet so real. Rogers seemed to be remembering something, almost as if it could happen. The others, interested, were watching him more intently now. But it was Critchit again who spoke for all. "Why didn't you tell us about it?" Rogers hesitated. "All right," he said. "I will." I do hope that you enjoyed my Vault of Horror teaser, ladies and gentlemen, and so I expect that your appetite has been whetted for more tales to come. No doubt the next chapter will be prickling your eardrums and tickling your imagination very, very soon. So do please stay tuned as we prepare to venture deeper and deeper into the Vault of Horror with our first story, Harold Rogers's bizarre and fateful tale, Midnight Mess.